to get through the hearing process so we can talk somewhat about potential amendments for tomorrow when we actually work the bill. I'm going to have Revisor Scott Abbott just kind of give us a brief overview, kind of a refresher on the bill as it was presented in 2021, because we do have some new members on the committee. So he'll do that. Then we'll listen to our testimony, and I believe we've got, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 verbal conferees and quite a few on written-only testimony. So go ahead and proceed, Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, members of the committee. House Bill 2281 is the state implementation of the National 988 Suicide Prevention and Mental Health Crisis Hotline. Just as kind of a high-level overview, the bill would implement and establish requirements for state agencies, KDADs, involved in implementing the hotline and services in the state of Kansas, as well as requirements on providers and hotline centers and the establishment and operation of those centers, as well as provisions for the services that would be attached to those and be responding to calls that are received by those hotline centers. So you see on pages 2 and 3, going on to page 4 of the bill, those are all of those requirements that would be established for KDADs in designating the hotline center, and the implementation process for the state agency side of it, as well as the requirements for the providers in transmitting the calls, making sure they're routed correctly, completing changes necessary to implement the 988 designation and the hotline center, as well as establishing a system for collecting fees similar to the 911 fee that would be established for funding and the operation of the 988 hotline. On page 4 of the bill, section 4 is that fee. It is the 988 fee. As it left this committee last session, that fee was set at 50 cents per month per subscriber account for any voice service accounts capable of contacting a hotline center. It's structured very similar to the existing 911 fee in how that is collected by the providers and remitted to the Department of Revenue and reconciled in that way. All of that language essentially is taken from the existing 911 fee, but that amount for the 988 fee would be 50 cents per month per account. It also has the standard liability language and the responsibilities for everybody involved in collecting, remitting that fee, how frequently it has to be collected and remitted, all of those types of provisions. The revenue from this fee would be deposited into the 988 Suicide Prevention and Mental Health Crisis Hotline Fund. That fund would be established by this bill, and the next section of the bill, section 5, beginning on page 5, details what that money may be used for. On page 6, you see that list under subsection D, monies credited to the fund shall only be used to, and then it gives a list of personnel, services, the operation of the 988 hotline center and the services that go along with that, as well as some other related mental health services. You'll see that this committee last year did add 2 things to that list of allowable expenditures, the mobile crisis response services, for behavioral health needs and specifically for persons with IDD needs as well. This committee also added a section, the section 6, beginning on page 6, for a prepaid wireless 988 fee in the amount of 50 cents per retail transaction for prepaid wireless service. Again, the language related to the 988's prepaid wireless fee is all very similar to the 911 prepaid wireless fee. So a lot of the mechanics that go into the operation, the collection, the remittance of that money is the same as the existing 911 fee. The final provision that this committee added last session was the establishment of the Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinics, or CCBHC fund. This would have been a portion of the money from those fees to go towards expenditures for CCBHCs. And that was the last amendment that this committee made last year, and that is all of the provisions of the bill. So, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I think we'll wait on questions because we know that there's going to be a lot of changes in this, and we'll work on that part later. Thank you, Scott. All right, committee, first conferee I have up is Patrick Fusick with T-Mobile. Welcome to committee. I'm glad you're now out free from your home office.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. It is nice to be out and about, kind of a people-to-people business, isn't it? Thank you. Patrick Fusick, I'm the Director of Government Affairs for T-Mobile, covering multiple states, and this is my favorite because I live here, obviously. Thank you to the Chair for your indulgence in working with the industry. I know each industry member can speak for themselves, but appreciate the opportunity that you and Andy North with KDADS has provided us to have input in the bill. We're here to support the bill in its current form. Like you mentioned, there's a few changes I think you've got maybe coming. We support the 20-cent surcharge that's in the bill. In doing multiple other states, it is interesting to see different tactics different states have taken to take this bill and this issue on. As you heard, the federal law passed in late 2020, so we it came new to us last year, and it was an opportunity again to get familiar with it. And then as we've gone through, and I think we have a pretty good piece of legislation in front of you, and happy to answer any questions. You have my testimony. There's more details in there about the issue, and I'm just happy to say thanks for the time to work together and answer any questions you have on the issue.
All right, thank you. We'll wait and we'll do all the questions after the conferees.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Next, I have Monica Kurz, Vice President for External Programming for the Kansas Suicide Prevention Headquarters out of Lawrence. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you, members of the committee. My name is Monica Kurz, and I am with the Kansas Suicide Prevention HQ. We are one of 3 local crisis contact centers that serve the state of Kansas on the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, soon to be 988, coming in July. My center serves as backup for Johnson County and Sedgwick County and first ring answer service for all 103 other counties. We are also the only center to provide text and online chat crisis services for the citizens of Kansas. We are really proud of our history of over 50 years in serving the people of Kansas with regards to any mental health need. As I am sure folks are familiar, it is absolutely essential that we be present during those times of suicide crisis, but we also place a lot of importance on being there for folks who are concerned about a loved one, for folks who are experiencing other distressing mental health symptoms, or who are just feeling overwhelmed by life in other ways in that moment. As the committee, I am sure, is aware, suicide continues to be a public health concern that is growing. We've seen a steady increase in the suicide rate for the last 20 years, with a sharp increase in the last 10. I think many of us were excited to see the suicide rate tick down in 2019. However, we have not seen that trend continue, which tells me that the people of Kansas, particularly our youth, are struggling every day and require bold action and the right support at the right time to address those needs. We know that the people of Kansas are reaching out to crisis hotlines more and more. We have seen a over 50% increase from Kansas callers to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline in the last 5 years. Johnson County Mental Health Center's local crisis line is reporting over a 60% increase in access to their hotline. We know that due to the nature of mental health crisis, the intensity in those moments, that it is essential that crisis services be available when people need them. And that's where hotlines come in. We're an important part of the crisis continuum of mental health services in Kansas. And as we transition to a 3-digit, easy-to-remember number, we expect those trends of increased hotline calls just to continue. Our partners at the national level are telling us to expect between a 2- and 5-fold increase when we transition to the 988 3-digit mental health and suicide prevention crisis line in July. I think that this is a good thing. It means that folks who are in crisis are going to be connected to the services they need. We have good peer-reviewed evidence literature that says that people who call hotlines are often experiencing very intense crises, and that over 60% of them say that they are not feeling suicidal after one contact with a hotline counselor. We are able to provide services right there on the phone and then help to connect people with those services that need to happen after the phone call, whether that's an ongoing mental health support or hopefully those mobile crisis teams that we've talked so much about. We know that in doing this, we not only increase that person's safety, but we are also decreasing the burden on our law enforcement officials to respond to those mental health crises. We're connecting them with a mental health professional instead of a law enforcement professional. We expect to see also a decrease in demand for 911 services by folks who are experiencing a health crisis because they'll have instead someone who can respond to what they're actually experiencing. I encourage the committee to identify a steady, sustainable, and reliable source of funding that will be dispersed by the legislature to deliver these 988 services. We put lives at risk by having insufficient ability to answer these phone calls. I can tell you that right now our in-state data says that we answer our hotline calls within 15 seconds of them coming to a hotline center. And those 15 seconds is a trend that we want to continue. We want to keep that answer time very quick. I can tell you that we've seen a great increase in the number of calls to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline that we're able to answer here in state. As I said in my testimony, I believe I was in front of this committee about 4 years ago sounding the alarm that we did not have the capacity to meet the needs of Kansans. And we're seeing that capacity grow thanks to the bold action of the legislature, and I look forward to seeing that continue. Thank you so much for your consideration, and I'm happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Monica, and I appreciate you not just reading your testimony to us, so appreciate that. Next, I have Kyle Kessler, the Executive Director of Association of Community Mental Health Centers of Kansas. Welcome to committee, Kyle.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I am Kyle Kessler, Executive Director at the Association of Community Mental Health Centers. We appreciate the opportunity to provide testimony in support of House Bill 2281 this afternoon, and I literally don't think that there's anything in my testimony that Monica didn't already tell you, so that makes me feel a little bit smarter. But I want to underscore that we updated our testimony to reflect, again, the new suicide statistics, which I remember coming in front of you all last year and mentioning that we were encouraged by believing that and everyone in this room, all of you have been supportive in some form or fashion of our initiatives relating to mental health and enhancing services and improving the resource allocation. And so I think that last year, seeing for the first time in over 5-6 years, the numbers actually dipping down, that was encouraging for a lot of us, thinking, you know, in the behavioral health public policy world, you combine resources and good public policy, you might improve public behavioral health and also save lives. And so we're asking you to do that again with House Bill 2281 and create sustainable funding for the 988 hotline, and believe that although we're not huge fans of unfunded federal mandates, this may be one that either Congress was preparing us for with the pandemic, or at least putting us in a position to be ready when this time hit. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Kyle. Next, I have Joan Tammany, and Joan is with the Executive Director of Comcare of Sedgwick County, and she's coming in virtually. Okay, are you there, Joan?
I am, thank you. Madam Chair, members of the committee, thanks for letting me do this virtually today. My schedule wouldn't allow me to get up there in person. This is really important legislation and really important to have the sustainable funding. Like Monica, I'm not going to read my testimony. You have that. What I do want to highlight, though, is this is going to take important work in terms of getting staffing up to the level that's necessary. I know for Comcare itself in our region, we were only reaching 60 to 65% of those calls 6 months ago. We're up to 85%, but that's still not going to be sufficient when the 988 line goes live. We're going to need staff, we're going to need new technology over time, and we're going to have to learn how to do the chat capabilities that Monica from headquarters spoke about. I think for us, the important thing to emphasize is the acuity of our patient population calling the crisis line has grown. When they call, they're in greater distress. They have more challenges and a lost sense of hope. And our responders on those lines try to develop relationships so that the person can have hope, that somebody cares about them, and that moment is so meaningful, impactful. We also have a good response rate that people feel relief after calling. Many times that's the only interaction we have with them. Others seek services ongoing. I do think the importance of the after activities like mobile crisis is significant in this legislation. I know for us, we've had a 20% increase in mobile response in response to people calling the crisis line. And in addition to that piece of information, 70% of those are unknown to Comcare, which is indicating that in South Central Kansas, the people have increased need for this type of services. So again, I'm a proponent of stable funding for this 980 implementation, and I just really think it's critical. We have a workforce that's challenged with poor pay already, and we don't want to exacerbate that by not sufficiently funding this critical legislation. So I'm going to leave it there. I appreciate the opportunity. This is really important.
Thank you, Joan. Appreciate it. Next, I have in person Nick Wood, Associate Director of Interhab. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I've spoken on this issue a number of times, at least once or twice in front of this committee. I've been asked to sort of talk about what IDD crisis support services would look like in Kansas. Right now, we have a large waiting list. The people who are served on the IDD waiver are about half of them have a severe to profound level of intellectual disability, but most people with intellectual disability in Kansas or elsewhere are people with just a mild form of intellectual disability, and they may not qualify for the IDD waiver. So we think that in our population, they are more likely, folks who would use these services a lot and are probably more likely to be known to us versus other systems. But could be more frequent utilizers. Plus, we do have in Kansas, we have about 165 people a year going onto the waiver via crisis exception. So they've had law enforcement contact, they've had contact with child protective services and adult protective services that then led them to the waiver. So I guess what we are concerned about is we've got a population who's already being served on the waiver who need crisis support on a regular basis. There are folks out there, especially when the hotline gets implemented, who have IDD, maybe have autism, who are not known to the system and will just call and get a crisis. So there's a need for coordination and understanding of that population. Who will serve them? How will we intervene in a crisis? Also, I just want to say very quickly, in talking about this a lot with people, they often ask what do you do if it's determined that somebody needs on-scene support? What does that look like? And without kind of walking through the whole training, most of these programs look pretty similar. They're based on a similar model. You probably heard about crisis prevention and intervention. A lot of nonprofits, school staff, health and human service staff are trained in crisis prevention and intervention. And these are team-based interventions. So if I'm the one who gets the call, whether I know the person or not, I'll go to the scene. The idea is that the team lead would then transfer from me to someone who is more confident and competent, maybe has better rapport with that person. And then they would carry out the intervention. If that person needs ongoing support, they're planning the intervention. I would be a person who is trained in de-escalation techniques, and I'm working with a team of people, and we're all on the same page, and we know how to use these techniques. But it really, I can sort of summarize it by saying, they teach you how to identify potential crisis and the behavior that goes along with it, and identify a good intervention. One of the slogans is you acknowledge, validate, offer to assist. And you're just keeping being very mindful of your facial expressions, your body posture, your tone, anything that would cause you to become part of the crisis. And sort of feeding the crisis instead of de-escalating. Afterward, there's debriefing with your team, there's follow-up care, and then you're reviewing the crisis plan to see what needs to be changed or improved for the next time, so to prevent the next crisis. So, Madam Chair, that's it for me. I'll stand for any questions at the appropriate time.
All right. Thank you very much, Nick. I appreciate that. Next, I have Amy Campbell, Kansas Mental Health Coalition. Welcome to committee, Amy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Amy Campbell. I work for the Kansas Mental Health Coalition. The Mental Health Coalition is a roundtable organization. Our members include community mental health centers, private hospitals, nonprofit associations, group advocacy groups like NAMI, and consumer-run groups. We also have individuals and corporate entities that are involved in the delivery of mental health care. Our group exists for the sole purpose of coming together with consensus recommendations for policy relating to mental health. Many of you have seen me stand before you and talk about the many different gaps in our continuum of care and the delivery of mental health care to Kansans. I don't know that I ever thought that I would be standing up here being able to advocate for this particular piece of the puzzle. It is something that I was involved, I served on a number of statewide advisory councils over the years, and when we would get to this issue of how do families navigate this system, know who to call, where is the right door to open, what are they eligible for, how can, what's the closest place, what can they, what do they need to do besides calling the local sheriff's department. This is it, folks. And it is, it's been developed over many years with a lot of input by a lot of different stakeholders on a national level. And we are on the cusp of doing something really big here in Kansas. It is very important that it receive the sustainable funding needed to be effective. And once we have that in place, I think that you will be amazed at how this system will be able to serve families that for years have just been left on the outside. I've received those calls. Many of you have received those calls. This is a key piece to the puzzle. So with that, Madam Chair, I don't want to be repetitive, but I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Amy. Next, I have Ryan Reza. I hope I pronounced that correctly, with the National Alliance on Mental Illness, coming in virtually. Welcome to committee.
Madam Chair and distinguished committee members, thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of NAMI Kansas and those we serve in support of HB 2281. It was my initial goal to be there in person, but due to some personal reasons couldn't make it, but you'll see me tomorrow, so I look forward to chatting with everyone in the committee. In the interest of time, I will just speak a little bit candidly and implore you all to read the testimony we provided. NAMI Kansas is the statewide organization for the National Alliance of Mental Illness, and we've provided services for Kansans for over 30 years. We have hundreds of members across the state, and I know that yesterday I submitted over 150 pages of testimony from some of those members in favor of House Bill 2281. I implore the committee to read those personal stories, intense tales on mental illness and how important this 988 infrastructure is for a lot of Kansans and a lot of NAMI Kansas members. This is one of the biggest bills and one of the biggest issues for our membership and other mental health stakeholders across the state. And honestly, Kansas is paving the way for mental health advocates across the country. I know, speaking from our own national organization, Kansas is one of, is in the top 10 of states in looking at 988 and how forward we are in thinking on the infrastructure. I thank the chairwoman for being a dedicated advocate and thank the rest of the committee for looking at this policy and taking input from mental health stakeholders from across the state. I will be here for any questions, and I'm happy to relieve the rest of my time.
Right. Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it. Next, I have Jason Watkins with the Wichita Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to committee, Jason.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jason Watkins, appearing for the Wichita Regional Chamber of Commerce. I'm going to come at this bill from a little different angle. Several years ago, the chamber identified workforce issues as the #1 thing that was hindering us during the recovery and the opportunity to grow our local economy. As many of you are aware, South Central Kansas is the hub of manufacturing, not just in Kansas, but for the United States. It's advanced manufacturing, make a lot of airplanes, make a lot of other things. The great thing or the great opportunity that we have in South Central Kansas is these are large employers, and their products are being exported, which means these are primary jobs. Nothing grows your economy like primary jobs because you're bringing money into your local economy from outside the state, oftentimes even outside of the country. But these are large manufacturers with multiple locations. So you take somebody like Spirit Aerosystems, they're in Wichita, but they're also in South Carolina. They actually have operations in other countries, same with Textron. And so when the opportunity arises for Spirit to build a new part for a Boeing airplane, they're going to put that project where there's available workforce. And we were struggling significantly with providing workforce in all of our manufacturing jobs and even outside of manufacturing. So as we started working with community and political leaders, one of the things that we identified very quickly was that a lack of money, resources, focus on mental health issues was actually a contributing factor to our workforce development crisis that we were in, and that frankly I'd say we're still experiencing. People with unaddressed, untreated mental and behavioral health issues miss work. And they not only miss work, they'll often leave the workforce. And so from a business perspective, we looked at this bill last year, even had the chairwoman come into the chamber and present to our leadership on the bill, everything that was involved in it, what it could do. And so we're happy to stand here today and support House Bill 2281. Now, I'm coming to you from a business perspective because I represent a business organization, but I would be remiss if I didn't also say we do recognize the human element here. Mental and behavioral health issues are real. They're hard. And all too often, they result in people dying. And so on a personal level, that should be unacceptable to every single one of us. And so we also see from that personal level, that personal perspective, that House Bill 2281 is good public policy. So we would ask the committee to report it out favorably. I know there's some amendments coming. We're supportive of what we've heard. So we would ask that you would report it out favorably. And Madam Chair, I actually live in your district, so I'll ask you personally to support the bill. Thank you.
I'll be happy to take that under consideration, Mr. President of the HOA. Okay, committee, that concludes the in-person testimony we have. I would have you look at, we have the Kansas Sheriff's Association, Sheriff Jeff Easter out of the Sedgwick County area, who's the legislative chair, has provided testimony, as has the Attorney General. Kansas Coalition Against Sexual and Domestic Violence, Children's Alliance of Kansas, and Johnson County Mental Health, and I'm not trying to diss anyone here, but there's quite a bit of testimony, so if you have the time, you may want to read those. And as you heard, we've got several of them that are for private citizens that have shared their stories with us. So at this time, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll take questions, and if we have time, we may go ahead and start working with some of the amendments that we've already got pre-prepared. Just depends upon how we go. If not, we'll start it tomorrow. So committee, are there questions for any of our conferees? Representative Barker and then Representative Arnberger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question for Monica. I remember last year we spoke in this setting. Yes. And last year I asked you a question about what is your budget now? Or has been? Wasn't it about $700,000?
So our budget was a little under $1 million, and we have seen that just about double with the preparations for 988.
Right. Okay. But I think your testimony was, and I looked at my notes. I think you said $700,000. Yeah. Would that be about right?
That would be about right.
Okay. All right. That's the only question I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Monica, is that just for your call center? Not the other two call centers? That
is just for my call center, and right. That is also a number that is not reflective of the expansion that we needed to meet the demand for 988.
That's kind of what you've been operating under as the
before there was any investment. Right. I think that the committee may be aware that prior to really last fiscal year, our organization subsisted primarily on private donations and a small amount of government funding. Right. So we've really seen a shift there because we've had to dramatically increase the number of services that we're providing.
Okay. And then individuals that are answering the phones, they're trained in mental health, de-escalation, et cetera. So it's not just like you could have me go on and be one of those operators.
No, we ask the counselors who answer our phone line to go through about 100 hours of in-house training. So a majority of our folks have at least a bachelor's degree education with supervision by a licensed clinical social worker, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They have access to that in addition to in-call room supervision to make sure that they are prepared for whatever comes in.
Okay, is anyone, and I know you were next, is there anyone else that has questions for Monica while she's up here? Yeah. Representative Turner. Then we won't have you bouncing back and forth like a jack-in-the-box.
I was looking forward to getting my steps in, Madam Chair,
okay.
but I can handle it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So back to the kind of a follow-up. So you had mentioned in there your funding used to be largely private, but it's shifted. Could you kind of give me the current day of what your funding is and the sources of it? Thank you.
Absolutely. So we have not seen a decrease in our activities for private fundraising. What we have seen is just a large increase in the amount of state funding that we are receiving, primarily through the Kansas Department of Aging and Disability Services, though we also provide some training services to support a different initiative at the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. So that's also lumped in with some of those government numbers. And then we have also really outreached our local county. We're located in Lawrence, and so we are now receiving some support from Douglas County as well. It's safe to say, Representative Turner, that we have grown up a lot and we have expanded a lot in the last really even 18 months. When we saw the passage of the national legislation, we knew that there was a big call and that we were going to have to answer it. And so we got busy identifying those sources of funding that we're going to keep those services sustainable.
So is it like 50-50 private public now, or where?
I would say that we're probably 40 private, 60 public.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Berquist.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here, Monica. I thought maybe this question might be for you. With the hopes and the plans for expanded mobile service and mobile crisis response, could you describe just in brief what that mobile service would look like? Would it be dispatched upon call, or would it be dispatched on how would it be done, and who would go?
Absolutely. I will attempt to answer to the best of my knowledge. So what we are really looking at is expanding what is referred to as kind of the crisis now continuum of care. And so really, we hope that when folks are in crisis that they will call 988, our number. And what we do find that I think is important to say is that for many calls that we take on the hotline, we will not need to dispatch an in-person response. We are able to stabilize the majority of phone calls on that phone call with a referral to follow-up mental health services that does not require that knock on the door. So I think that that's important to say up front. Our hope as we roll out this 988 system is that 988 will be the mechanism for being able to dispatch those mobile crisis response teams. As I may have a handy from KDADS also to speak to this, I anticipate that those mobile crisis response teams will be tied to the local community mental health centers who will have relationships with to be able to alert them when those responses are needed.
Thank you, ma'am. And a follow-up, with in the advent that it does move to a crisis response, a mobile response, would there be an automatic call for a law enforcement backup or emergency services backup in either case?
So really what we're seeing across the nation is that it's really imperative that we have good procedures and protocols that outline when a law enforcement response is needed and when a situation can be handled by a team that is comprised primarily of mental health advocates or professionals, I guess I should say. Now, I won't speak for every mental health center in Kansas because I do know that there is a preference for co-responder models in some of those communities where you pair a law enforcement professional with a mental health professional. But as we have had conversations with folks across the country who are doing this work, we find that there is a pretty consistent set of questions that need to be asked to determine which kind of response is going to make the most sense. So our intention is never to send a mental health professional into a situation where someone is actively trying to take their own life, has a weapon present, is under the influence of substances, is making threats in a way that would be unsafe. And so we're really looking at these kind of well-established protocols, some of which are coming from quite large urban areas, to think about how to really protect the safety of our mental health professionals. Does that help?
Very good, ma'am. Thank you, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Epley.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thanks for your testimony, and pretty excited about this too. And just want to make sure the committee as a whole understands about the other two call centers, their location, if you have any knowledge about their budget or how they're structured, or just, I know that they're not your centers, and I understand that, but any information you can impart to the committee I think would be helpful.
Absolutely. So as I stated in my testimony, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is a network of local call centers. So there is technology that routes calls based on area code, and it's really up to each region how those calls are managed. So in Kansas, we currently have 3 crisis contact centers. My organization, Johnson County Mental Health Center, has a crisis line that serves Johnson County residents or those with Johnson County area codes. And Comcare of Sedgwick County has a crisis line that is connected to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline for those folks who are calling from the Sedgwick County area. So the way that the system operates is going to be a little bit different from center to center. My center is not a community mental health center. We're primarily focused on providing these crisis line services. That's our area of expertise. That's our specialty. And so that's what we're doing. With Johnson County and Comcare, you see that they have much more complex operations with many more departments and a hotline that is a part of that. Joan was here to speak with you a bit about what they see there in Wichita. What we find with the hotline is that it's important that there be redundancies. I think that it's probably not difficult to imagine that if you are in a mental health crisis, you make a phone call, you don't want to wait on the phone for 10 minutes. You don't want to wait on the phone for 2 minutes. I was actually speaking with a colleague who does work on the Missouri side who had a client who hung up because she waited for 2 minutes on the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, and that's how long she could tolerate. And after that, she hung up, and some scary things happened. And so I think that it's important that we have a network like mine where when Johnson County or Sedgwick County is on those phone calls, that they roll over to our center so that we can be that very quick response for people. A part of the 988 implementation plan also includes adding a 4th center, which will act as a statewide backup for us so that we're able to capture really all of those calls from Kansas without having to utilize any of the national backups. That center is not yet on board, but we look forward to them joining us.
Again, just to follow, in the event that someone would call, say, from Norton or, Garden City, Kansas, would they be routed to your center? And if you could review with the committee, are those designations going to remain the same, those geographic designations? Or are they going to change going forward as we roll this out?
So yes, someone calls from Garden City, someone calls from Norton, someone calls from Liberal, Kansas. They are coming to our center. So we are the front line for those other 103 counties. That's something that we're really proud of. We've been doing it since the inception of the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, and stay quite busy from some of those counties. At this point, there's no plan to change that, as I think that some of the members, especially those who were on the special committee for mental health modernization and reform, you may have seen me go over some of that implementation plan in more detail. A part of our 988 implementation is a 988 coalition that is a cross-section of a broad cross-section of sectors that are coming together to really think about what the needs are in Kansas, and will provide feedback to KDADs about how that rollout is going. And so I anticipate in July and beyond, we will be having continuing conversations about how we are best meeting the needs of all Kansans, including those folks who are living very far west.
Representative Moore, is your question for Monica?
Yeah,
Okay.
It could be for Joan or Monica. Actually, Joan brought it up, but whoever wants to answer it. So I think she said in her testimony from Comcare that the acuity of the calls has changed for the, not for the better. And I was curious, is that mostly COVID related because of all the stresses, or what other things? And I know that might be too involved of a question, but your best stab at it.
It's not too involved, but I think it's a complicated answer to that question, because COVID is a part of folks' daily life, and depending on what's going on in any local community, with the stressors that may come along with that, or some of the fallout with regards to economic hardships or other pieces, I think that we really have seen the quality of calls change as the COVID-19 pandemic has progressed. It really speaks to the kind of flexibility that we need to have, because it's not just COVID. I think about the fires that we had out west after that terrible snowstorm, and again, we saw a real increase in folks needing to reach out for crisis contact after that. We started getting in discussion with the Department of Agriculture about how we add a chat now feature to their website, right? So that we can be available to folks when their communities are experiencing crisis. So yes, I think that the intensity is increasing. Is COVID part of it? Very likely. Is it the whole picture? I don't think so.
Representative Turner, is your question for Monica? Yes. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just on some of the points we talked about, so to follow up, you said there's 3 centers now, but under this bill, would there be 4? You said they were going to add a 4th?
We're adding a 4th center. HIS, who I believe that their CEO is here today, though he did not present testimony, currently serves many of the mental health centers in Kansas in an after-hours capacity. There are some specific requirements to be a part of the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, and I know that they're in pursuit of meeting those requirements so that they can join the line.
And currently, is there administration levels above you? Or, I see in the bill the creation of an advisory board, adding a position for a statewide prevention coordinator. Is that all brand new stuff, or is there some existing structure currently?
Again, Commissioner Brown may be the better person to answer this particular question.
Yeah, let's just let him handle that. Okay. Representative Arnberger. No, we'll have you come up here in a little bit, Andy. Representative Arnberger, it was for someone else, Monica, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question's for Patrick. In your testimony, and you said, and in your oral testimony, you said a 20-cent surcharge instead of 50 cents. Is that agreed upon language that we don't know about?
Well, the original bill was Madam Chair, yeah, I defer. The original bill, as introduced last year, was 50 cents, and I think that was our first chance as an industry to look at this. I mean, this, again, was a new issue for us. We were in this committee, not utilities, so we're used to dealing with 911 fees and that process in utilities committee. So I think that was part of the delay in the process, just talking through what is the needs and working with and I forgot to mention the stakeholders. We work with all the folks, Monica and others that are here. So 20 cents is the most recent discussion around that amount. So I believe that's what is in the reviser's version.
Okay. And then when you say stakeholders, did you guys also meet with Verizon, AT&T? Were they also part of the?
They have been. I think we've all have been part of larger groups, and also I think individual meetings with the chairwoman, as I understand it, as well.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure, because I didn't see Verizon or AT&T anywhere, but.
I think they're here.
Verizon's in the room.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is AT&T in the room? Oh, there he is back there.
Okay. I didn't see.
So we can hear from those in a few minutes, and you can ask those
That's
questions.
fine. I just was curious because with oral testimony, I wasn't sure. So thank you.
No problem.
Representative Clifford, is yours for Patrick or someone else?
Ms. Campbell.
Okay. Amy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For those in the room, I've spent the last 7 years on the Community Mental Health Center Board in Garden City. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. And it begs the question for me, is the funding robust enough for that next piece? Because I know it isn't now to get this emergency response when the handoff occurs. So being an advocate that you are, I'd like you to comment on that.
And I'm not going to answer that question because I was not part of negotiations which have affected the fiscal note and how this bill is going to be handled, but Andy Brown would be your expert guy, I think.
So you're calling a friend to help you?
I'm going to phone a friend.
Is Andy in the room?
I'm going to phone a friend.
This actually takes a lot of friends, Representative Clifford. So I think if we'll go through and get questions from the conferees we had, and then Andy's here definitely as a backup because he's testified several times on this issue in the committee. So are there any questions for any of the other conferees that we had appear before us? Okay, Andy, if you wouldn't mind stepping up, and I believe you can answer Representative Clifford's question, and then I believe that Representative Turner had one for you as well.
Andy Brown, I'm the Commissioner for Behavioral Health Services at the Kansas Department for Aging and Disability Services. And thank you for the opportunity to answer questions about the bill. I agree it's an important bill. So currently, yes, like we presented a bill last year at the 50-cent mark that would have generated, I think, 17.4 million, sorry. That we could then use for a variety of services. And in the time since last year to this year, there's been a number of changes on the scene that have occurred. So the legislature was able to fund some portions of what we asked for in the bill through the SGF, and also we've been able to receive some funds through the federal government from ARPA that will help us meet these obligations. So we're comfortable reducing the amount from 50 cents to a lower amount. It does cut services to some degree. So we do have funding in there for mobile crisis and crisis stabilization services that are at a reduced amount from the 50-cent amount down to, I think we provided options for everything from 20 cents to 35 cents to 45 cents. So there was a lot of discussion that went into that last session, and we've had some dialogue with the telecoms, and I think we're at a comfortable spot now.
Yes, sorry, Representative Ellis was asking, what is the number now? Is it 20 cents? We don't know.
Well, we're just hearing the bill right now. We're not working it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
Representative Turner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess it's the question I asked before in terms of statewide administration over the existing infrastructure. Thank you.
And so for the state suicide, for the 988 Special Projects Coordinator position at KDADS, that is a position that we currently have on staff. It's been funded for the last year under a grant, and we are looking to include that moving forward with funding from this bill. What that role does is it helps convene the coalition that Monica was talking about, and bring together those partners to discuss implementation planning as well as the implementation process. So that's an important role for us to try to maintain on our staff in order to make sure that we have somebody whose full-time job is to monitor this and make sure that the reporting occurs and that the accountability is there for the funding. And then the coalition was formed as part of the 988 planning grant that we received last year, and it has been operating for about a year now.
Representative Barker.
Thank you. Good to see you again. Does your organization keep the data from these three service centers where people are calling in? And if so, is that yes or no, or do I need to go back to the service centers?
Well, okay, so the answer to the question is we keep data that's reported to us, but we don't maintain the electronic records.
Okay. I just want one simple question. How many calls do you receive in a year that are to a crisis center, but not necessarily just for any crisis, only the ones that deal with suicide? And does anyone have those numbers?
Yeah. So our projected number that we have from Vibrant, who administers the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline across the country, is that Kansas is anticipated to receive 66,000 calls next year to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline.
That's the only question I had. Yep. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Wolfmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. in response to Dr. Clifford's question about the funding, you mentioned that part of that would be ARPA funding. And so since that's primarily one-time funding, is that going to create a problem in future years, or is that for a one-time expense? Or maybe you can explain that a bit.
Yeah. So last year, the legislature put $3 million of state general funds into the KDAD's budget for the purposes of 988 call center operations and implementation. There was a caveat added to that said, like, if ARPA funds become available, ARPA funds will be used instead of the state general fund dollars. So the way that was put in, we're basically able to use ARPA dollars for as long as those are available, and then once those cease to be available, we'll go back to using state general fund dollars.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Epley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, it's along the lines of Representative Wolfmore. I guess it gets into a definitional issue about sustainable source. And, you have one-time expenses, and I understand that. And some of that may have come from ARPA/SGF federal funding. And that's great. I think at least one of the important questions here today is 20 cents per line or per user going to be enough for sustainable funding for this entity, which I think we all feel is very important. Can you address that, Andy?
Yeah, I believe that 20 cents would be enough to cover the call centers and provide some supplemental funding for some of the other response services. But this bill was never intended or designed to fund the entire crisis system. That's why we've had a lot of discussions in previous hearings about, what the mix of funding available for these services are. And, I'm committed to making sure that we try to find the funding needed in order to fully fund the system. And this bill wasn't intended to fully fund the system from the start, even at 50 cents. So it's a matter of degree of support. There's a few $1 million less at 20 cents than there is at 50 cents, but we can still come up with the funding that we need for the call centers. And we can still provide some support for mobile crisis in rural areas and crisis stabilization units and expanding those into places that don't currently have them.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think you pretty much addressed that. I guess how you want to define full funding and versus partial funding, I think, is maybe something that's going to be left to you all to really weigh in on. I just think the speaking, I hope, for the majority of the committee is that we want to make sure that if we're going to have stabilization teams and crisis intervention teams, that's something, say, in the out years, in 3 to 5 years, that all of a sudden it's like, well, you've called in and we really want to address your problem, but it'll be a couple of weeks before we can get a team out to see you, and maybe that's not an appropriate timeline. So that's my only concern about this, and I guess full funding is something that is to be determined, so, or partial funding. Mm-hmm. So, and you feel that 20 cents is adequate to get us in the game and do a good job getting started with the other funding sources that you identified?
Yeah, I mean, I believe that the 20 cents will provide us with about 6.9 million. And I'm anticipating that coupled with the 3 million that's in the budget now for state general funds / ARPA funds would be enough to get us fully funded for the 988 contact centers at the estimated $6 million that we need for that, as well as providing several million that we can use for crisis stabilization and mobile crisis support.
All right, thank you.
I would say if we made them wait a couple of weeks, they're probably getting services from a mortuary at that point. Committee, are there any other questions for Andy? Okay, thank you, Andy, appreciate it. I did have Dave hand out some of the mobile crisis response types to kind of help you with information on that. And I would say at this time here, we can close the hearing on House Bill 2281, and we'll go ahead and start working it and see how far we get, and that determines what we have to do tomorrow. So if Revisor Abbott would hand out some potential amendments, I'd appreciate it, or balloons, whichever we're calling them today. I think they're balloons, aren't they? Yes. All right, committee, we're going to have Revisor Abbott go through the balloons, see how far that we can get. I think the bigger ones is as we get deeper into the bill. So then you can just set where you're at, Scott. You don't have to stand up there. I will tell the committee members, I think you heard some of this, there has been extensive conversations with AT&T, T-Mobile, and Verizon. I had to stop and think. There's been some conversation also with the other telecoms, and they are fine at this time. We've kept him busy, so.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and hello again, committee members. So the first substantive change to the bill is on page 2. This is under the portion of the bill that designates the requirements for KDADs and their implementation of the hotline and near the bottom of the page about developing plans for payments of uninsured services would add also plans for payment for Comcare members.
Scott, is it all right if we try to adopt some of these as we go along? Are you good with that?
I am good with whatever you would like.
Okay. Do I have a motion on page 2 on line 43? Representative Kelly? Seconded by Representative Epley. Discussions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion passes.
The next change, and really kind of the beginning of the bulk of the changes, begins on page 4 of the balloon. This would add under the requirements that are imposed on providers that on and after July 1 of 2022, they begin collecting and remitting the 988 fees to the 988 Suicide Prevention and Mental Health Crisis Hotline Fund that is established by the bill. I mentioned when I was explaining the overview of the bill that that fund is created by this bill already. So that would be added with that beginning date of July 1 of 2022.
All right, committee on balloon number 2, discussion, comments.
Move for passage of balloon 2.
Motion by Representative Epley, seconded by Representative Kelly. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion carries. Okay, now we are on the second balloon on page 4. And I believe that Scott's going to have to wing this one for me. So you can cross out what it says and insert it'll actually be a 20-cent fee. So Scott, you have to figure out how that's worded on the fly.
So Madam Chair, it's actually simpler than that.
Oh.
So that second balloon on page 4 would not be needed.
Okay.
And then if you go down the page a little bit to line 29.
Yep.
The balloon was already striking the 50 cents in the underlying bill for 20 cents with a reference to that escalator language. So that change on line 29 would just be to strike the 50 cents and insert 20 cents.
And then we would take out except as provided in
Right.
paragraph 2. So everyone understand that? If you look at the third from the bottom balloon that says 20, except as provided, take out except as provided in paragraph 2. On line 29 of page 4, where 50 cents is crossed out, that becomes 20 cents. Everyone follow?
Madam Chair, I move for balloon number 3 as you just presented on section 4 revision and the 20-cent amount inserted for the 50-cent amount on line 29 as, again, you nicely outlined.
Seconded by Representative Kelly. Questions, comments? Representative Barker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really appreciate this. It just goes to show you, if we'd have passed it last year, it would have been 50 cents, and we'd be charging people too much. But I have to go back to my old argument. You know, we have an appropriations process here in the legislature, and we have a taxing committee. If we're going to tax, I looked at the number earlier, thousands of people in the state of Kansas, it should be at the tax committee, because this is a tax. You can call it a fee, but it is a tax. And I'm not, you know, in the state this year, and I think next year we'll have additional revenue. Andy mentioned that he got some additional funding this year. So I love the bill. I just don't like how we're paying for it. I think we go, you know, they go to the budget committees, they present their need. The budget committees, if they approve it or whatever amount they approve, goes to the appropriations committee, and if they approve it, it goes in our budget. And if there's insufficient funds, they go to the tax committee and let the tax committee, who have the expertise, and they're the ones that tax the folks in the state of Kansas. But I'm not inclined for this committee to put a tax on every man, woman, and child in the state of Kansas who has a cell phone. I mean, just philosophically, I just can't agree to that. We have a process up here, and this is a policy committee. It's not the appropriations committee, and it is surely not the tax committee, because I've sat on tax, and it's a boring committee. And I've also sat on appropriations, and, you know, that's, but I've never been on a budget committee. But if they need the money, and if they can justify it, it goes to a budget committee, they put it in their budget, and then it goes to the appropriations committee, and if they approve it, then it's in the budget. And because we create funds, a fee-funded committee, one, it has very little legislative oversight. Once it's there forever. Reminds me of the 911 fees. You can see where we started out and where we're at today. And, you know, they have the money. We tell them where to spend it, but if they go through the appropriations, go through the budget committees, they have questions of those, and they're accustomed to asking those questions on those budget committees. So whether it's 50 cents, which if we had passed last year, they'd have a lot more money. Now they're come down to 20 cents. I would be against it if they brought it down to a penny, just because I'm against passing a tax in Health and Human Services that affects every man, woman, and child that has a cell phone in the state of Kansas. So that's I just can't agree to any amount because I think we have a process up here, and we encourage people to come to budget committees or go to budget committees and seek their funding and justify it. So that's what I have to say, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for giving me the time.
You're welcome. Representative Epley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I really do want to defer to my esteemed older colleague on this subject, who has been here longer than I have and who makes very salient comments. However, I think this is a unique opportunity for mental health in our state, and I don't want to miss that opportunity. I truly look at this as an important fee for mental health, and it is a vast improvement from last year, where we were going to subject a 50-cent fee. And you know, I wouldn't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I think this is a good compromise to provide some SGF funding ongoing, and yet a fee on the end user, so that there's some buy-in, some skin in the game, because that's really who it affects, is people who utilize a cell phone. It seems like the fee fits the issue to me, and I think it's a pragmatic, practical way of looking at it. And I certainly wouldn't blame anybody for voting against this, siding with my esteemed colleague, but I, on the other hand, think we have to take a practical approach, because this is such an important issue. It's going to come to us anyway, and what I worry about going forward, ladies and gentlemen, is the concept of being subject to the budgetary process year after year, and some years there's enough and sometimes there isn't, and I think this would provide a base amount of funding for this to be safely monetized going forward. And that's my concern, that this is that important of an issue, like 911 was once before. And you know, obviously, Representative, I can discuss later how that's worked out. as a physician, I think 911's worked out awfully well in the state of Kansas, but again, we can discuss that later, and I appreciate the time, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Further comments, questions? Let me go to someone else first. Representative Clifford.
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. Regardless of how this goes through from a funding standpoint, I wonder if the revisor or Andy or somebody could give us an idea of what we have now in front of us, because at 50 cents we have this $17.5 million budget, and we had some itemization. I'm still curious about what is going to go to the community mental health centers who are actually going to be at the door with these folks. So is there a breakdown if we're at 20 cents and that number's, I don't know, 6.5 million or whatever? And I'm curious where that money's going. I know 3 million or so is going to the call centers, but where's it going beyond that?
Andy?
So I believe I sent some numbers to the chairwoman earlier, but my math says that it'll generate about 6.9 million. 3 million of that will go to the call centers to make up the difference between where we're at now and where we need to be for next year. And then there's $1 million that I think we can allocate towards promotion of the 988 number across the state to support the national media campaigns around that and make sure that Kansans know which number is appropriate for them to call when they're in a mental health crisis. And then that leaves a remaining amount that is sort of divided between mobile crisis services and crisis stabilization services. And so those crisis stabilization and mobile crisis funds would be the funds that would be allocated towards the services that the CMHCs would provide.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And before you have your rebuttal with Representative Epley, we'll let you have one big rebuttal with both of us.
I wanted to say, I really, the underlying bill I'm in total support of. I think it's an issue that we need to address.
Well, I was going to speak first and then let you rebuttal for both of us at the same time.
But my esteemed colleague, if I recall, last year told me that this was a great bill at 50 cents. Now he's telling me, well, it may not have been a great bill at 50 cents. It's now a great bill at 20 cents. We've saved 30 cents to the taxpayer.
Say great bill.
No, he was a very big advocate for the 50 cents. Last year.
Great bill. This year, not so great.
No. Last year he said it was a great bill at 50 cents. Now he thinks it's a mediocre bill, whatever. And last year it could have been $1. But bottom line is, it is a tax. We're putting it on every cell phone. And, you know, most people, when they have kids that are 12 years old, for security reasons, we give them a cell phone. And the kids want them, which is crazy because then we can track them. But that's a good thing for parents, not a good thing for the 12-year-old or 13-year-old. But the underlying bill, I think, is a great bill. It's just like the United States Congress, though, to send us something like this. And they, well, you know, we're going to give you an avenue to fund it, but you can use whatever avenue you want, but you're going to fund it. I just think that, you know, the proper, and I talked to Scott earlier, and I told him we were working the bill tomorrow, so I was going to talk to him after committee, because I was going to have an amendment drafted that would leave the bill exactly, and that would encourage the organizations to go to the budget committee, submit their budget, put this in it, this amount, $6 million or whatever, and go through the budget process, through the budget committee, and then through the appropriations committee. And if there needs to be an additional revenue source, they go to the tax committee and have them work the tax. But unfortunately, I guess we're working it today, so I don't have an amendment, but that would have been my amendment, that we just cut the fees out and then we work the bill from there. Because I think it's a great bill. And I think we've done a really good job, the folks out here. My problem is how we fund it. And do we want to keep putting another tax and another tax on folks, and not when, especially when we have surplus revenue. With that, thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, in response to the surplus that we have right now, a lot of that's one-time money. It's not ongoing revenue money. The other thing is this is not an unusual process, so I do take a little bit of angst with that. Having been involved in the appropriations process for many, many years, having served on social services and a few other committees, it's not unusual for a fee increase on something to actually go through that process. I did have discussion with the utilities chair last year. He wasn't happy it didn't go through utilities. The utility chair this year thought it should go through there, but it's here. It's with us. And that had to do with the fact that this committee had to deal with more than just looking at a number of a fee, because this bill is much bigger than that. What you see in this bill looks complicated. Now, as you implement it, that's where the complication is going to become. That's a much bigger deal. So, we were fortunate last year that the Appropriations Committee did decide to put money in there. Otherwise, we wouldn't have 2 other call centers up and running right now because we didn't pass this bill. So, I'm a little, like I said, a little bit of angst that you would say it has to go through these other committees when that doesn't happen. When the 911 in 19 was 41 cents put on there, didn't see it go through tax, didn't see it go through approps. Boom, flew right through the House, flew right through the Senate, and got signed at 41 cents. No one can really tell me what that all goes to. We can sit here and Andy can break this down for you. I've got several different breakouts depending upon what the money is. We will be asking the Appropriations Committee to come in with additional SGF. The concern is, if I look back, I was here when we closed Topeka State Hospital. I was here when we closed Winfield, and we promised the people of Kansas that when we did that, the money would follow the clients. Guess what hasn't happened? The money has not followed the clients. When I got back here in 2017 and was chair of the social services budget, and I seen that the community mental health grants had been cut almost in half, I was appalled that that's what this state had done to the people it made a commitment to when we closed those facilities. We're still not up where we belong in providing mental health services to the state of Kansas. Mental health services have been exacerbated through the pandemic. The suicide rates are off of the charts, and suicide does not differentiate whether you come from a poor family or a rich family or what your race is. There's a lot of people, I lay you 10 to 1 sitting in this very room today, that deal with mental health issues, but they wear a smile. There's not a business in this state, there's not a budget that this state has that is not impacted negatively by mental health disease, period. Productivity, absenteeism, not going to work. We heard that earlier coming from the chamber. So this is an issue that is not just for one budget to resolve. This is part of this. So it's going to take SGF to fund what this state actually needs. This is an unfunded mandate that came down from the feds. We are required to provide services for everyone that calls 988, everyone. We are required to follow up with everyone that calls 988. We are required to meet a 90% call rate. And you heard Joan from Comcare earlier say that they're at 85 and they have fought to get to 85%. We have to be at 90. Doesn't tell us what the penalties are, but we know how the feds sometimes take and operate. So yes, I'm very passionate about this. I have worked on this issue in depth for many, many years. 1997, Representative Ballard and I went on appropriations together and on social services budget. I've got about 10 to 12 experience with those budgets. And these budgets here get cut. I think Representative Wolf Moore can attest to it. We fight for that money in committees because some people think that corrections or some of the other things take priority out of from people's lives. So,
Madam Chair, I appreciate it. I know you were a Budget Committee Chair, and you've been on appropriations, and so have I. And I compliment you for your work in the area of mental health. I think it's, I'm maybe one of the few people here that I probably went to 20 suicides in my career. Some were hangings, most of them were gunshots. One little girl started her car and then took her blanket and her pillow and laid down by the exhaust. And the effects that has on the families. It's long-lasting. Never ends,
is.
I don't think. So I have a great appreciation for what we're trying to accomplish here. And in some ways, I'm kind of happy that the federal government made this mandate. I wish it was funded. So the only dispute I have about this whole bill is how we're funding it. I just find, and it's just the way I am. I mean, I think we have a process. It's called appropriations, and it's called tax. And you are correct. Probably when the 911 went through, it probably went through utilities. I've never thought about utilities committee, but that could come through. But it is a tax, and I just think that once you create it, we have very little oversight of it. It's a fund that goes there. And I would imagine it'll be like most government programs in 5 years or less. They'll come in and go from 20 or 25 cents to 50 cents then, and then maybe to $1 at some point in time. And I just think for accountability purposes that we go through the appropriations process. With that, I think the underlying bill is great. I think, and I'm very supportive of it. The only difference is how we fund it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, and to give you an idea of what the federal language came in at, it says use of 988 funds. A fee or charge collected under this subsection shall only be imposed, collected, and used to pay expenses that a state and political subdivision of a state, an Indian tribe or village or regional corporation serving a region established pursuant to the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act is expected to incur that are reasonably attributed to A, ensuring the efficient and effective routing of calls made to the 988 National Suicide Prevention and Mental Health Crisis Hotline to an appropriate crisis center, and B, personnel and the provision of acute mental health crisis outreach and stabilization services by directly responding to the 988 National Suicide. So the federal government expected states to charge a fee, and most of the states have charged a fee and are charging a fee. So just to give you an idea.
Thank you
Is there
very much,
further
Madam
questions
Chair.
or comments? Representative Epley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, with all due respect to Representative Barker, I really enjoy my time on Fed and State and hope that this doesn't get me excommunicated. But, because I do enjoy it. But I just have to say, you know, I haven't been here near as long as my esteemed colleagues that have both spoken. I mean that, honestly. But I've been here long enough to see us go from a budget deficit of, you know, a little over $1.2 billion to now an overage in excess, I think, north of $2 billion. And I understand the optics right now when we've got adequate funding for this. We do. But budgets come and go. Budget overages come and go. Suicide doesn't. Suicide's going to be here. I mean, it's been here, it's going to be here. And I think this provides a base level of funding through a fee that will be here, you know, as you would point out, into perpetuity, perhaps, to provide funding as I think it belongs for this. And I think that's really important because we've all been through those budgetary cuts from, you know, from KDOT and from other sources, and certainly mental health has been cut. And I represented, I'm going to say this, I represent a district where we closed the youth center in Atchison in 2009, put 106 people out of jobs, put a lot of kids back in high schools and schools that, frankly, in my opinion, we mainstreamed them. That was the methodology at the time. I think we're still dealing with that right now in our communities and in, you know, in society in Kansas. And it's, you know, I think the youth center served a very meaningful purpose. I'd love to have anyone that wants to come up and see the campus sometime. It's totally decimated. You know, animals are living there, and it's about 25 buildings that are just totally vacant now, and it's kind of sad. It's really sad. Some of the individuals in the audience know what I'm talking about. And so, having said that, I think it's very important that we provide base funding for this because suicide ain't going away. Budget overages and budget you know, under amounts, they come and go. But this suicide does not. And I think we have to provide a base level of funding for this going forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Bergquist.
Thank you, ma'am. In relation to the appropriations for such a project, most of the people that work in this field work with passion, with mission, with purpose, and what they may sometimes lack, maybe not, but would be that actual mode of operation. Because what you want to do is get the job done. You want to get the job done as quickly as possible with each person that calls in on that phone line. But pretty often, we may be at a point where we don't have an analysis done to see what we really do need, what we do need as far as expense. That doesn't mean that 20 cents doesn't happen or that that same amount of money doesn't happen, but that appropriations process says we've analyzed what it's going to take to staff this many phones during this next year. We've analyzed what it's going to take to have mobile services, mobile crisis services. We've analyzed what it's going to take to at least some degree, some measurable degree, what it's going to take to establish more centers. Those are all things towards the same goal that Representative Barker and myself and maybe others are concerned about, that we don't end up being short funds or long funds, or that if we're long funds, that we know what else can also be done with those funds to be able to help to alleviate the problem even more. I believe that everything about the cause is exactly right. I think that the process of funding is quick, and I'm not sure there's another quick maybe process that could happen, provide emergency funding for the next year to get launched, and then the analysis take place towards a 20-cent funding in the future. But I don't know if I share the same concerns as the representative, but I do share the concern of making sure that we're doing the very best we can with the people's money, and that's whether it's in a fee or whether it's in a direct tax. But good times and bad times financially shouldn't, people in crisis shouldn't be the casualty of those things. It's whether or not you absolutely appropriate taxes towards something or some kind of fee, so that if cell phones change and services change as technology does, that suddenly you're not going to end up in a hole again. And we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but we do know what we can commit to as legislators, and that is to fund things that are important. And we believe this is important, and so funding is really probably the issue, not whether it's important. Appreciate your passion. Thanks.
Well, and just so that people are clear, this isn't just about cell phones. It'll be, landlines. I was sitting here running my numbers with 8 cell lines and 2 landlines. I'm going to pay $2 a month on this. Representative Reese.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand all of the concerns with the funding. I know I expressed that when we first began to talk about this bill, that was an issue, and I acknowledge that, and I had many people come to me about that. And it's trying to find the balance, and I think we've found a balance, where we can fund something that is going to be such a dramatic change for the people in Kansas. And I think about young people, many of you know, I'm a clinical social worker. I work in psychiatric services, and I work at a local hospital in the psychiatric unit. And I see this all the time. And one of the things, and I've worked in community mental health centers, and many, many times what people would tell me is, they didn't want to have to go to a hospital. They didn't want to have to go to a law enforcement center necessarily, because they thought that they would be held against their will. That's a fear. But when you have a lifeline like this that can be used, people are more likely to use it. And what we have seen just in the telehealth during the pandemic, the use of that has been off the chart, because people have felt very comfortable with that. And this is going to bring the same thing. I truly believe that we will see an increase in calls, because people are going to be more comfortable with it, and there'll be younger people that will hopefully reach out and ask for help versus trying to take their own lives. I like this bill. I think the fee that we are looking at, I think we have found a good balance with it, and fully support it. Thank you.
Further questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I would move we pass, I think it's balloon number 3 that we're on, as presented with the 20-cent fee, and then the rewording of section 4 is outlined. Is that correct, Scott?
We're numbering as we do them.
Yeah, so, Madam Chair, Representative, looking at the document itself, it would be the second balloon on page 4, the following line 36 insert, and then near the bottom of the page, the third from the bottom that begins with the 20 cents with your modifications.
What he said.
Representative Kelly, seconds. Representative Armberger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thought that we didn't need the, where it said following line 36. I thought we were crossing all of that out. Right? And did you just state, Scott, that it's staying in the motion?
No, that is gone already.
So the motion we're on right now is just the 20 cents, or is it also the, right above it, the section 4? Are we also voting on that balloon?
No, it's just this 20
Just the 20
cents.
cents.
So if you're marking your sheet as you go along, we've crossed out number 36 as if it never existed.
Right.
Because we don't need a vote to do that. Then we're down to where it says 20 cents except as provided in paragraph 2. Well, paragraph 2 is now gone. We're taking out except as provided. And then where it says on line 29 in section 4, where 50 cents is crossed out, we'll now read 20 cents.
Okay, I just want to make sure I was trying to understand.
No, it's always good to have clarity, so. Further questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it, motion carries. Okay, now we would be on, now, Scott, do we have to do anything with the line 23 and the line 24? Because those are just technicals? Okay. And we always give our revisers the leeway to deal with technicals amendments. What about the balloon that says voice? Is that a technical as well?
Madam Chair, it's clarifying, I don't know that you would call it technical. It clarifies that the service being described of the accounts that the fee is being imposed on are voice service accounts.
So would you prefer we have a motion? Okay. Everyone understand the addition of the word voice?
I have lots of questions on that.
Anyone besides Representative Armberger that may have questions on that? You have a question?
Yes.
Representative Armberger.
So my question is, with putting in the word voice, fax machines are excluded, correct? Or no?
Well, if they're on a dedicated line,
Right.
they're charged. Right, Scott?
That's
Or
what
not?
I need to figure out. Because I guess how I understand when you're putting in voice is can you take that phone call, that phone line, and can you have a voice conversation?
Okay, can maybe one of our telecom folks out there, how does it work? Because we're trying to mirror 911. So does 911 put a fee on fax, or is it just voice and VoIP?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a great question. So you're talking about voice over the internet, so that's going to be a voice product. But if you're talking about like a laptop that you don't, a fax machine, to your point, it would not apply to a fax machine. And I think that is how 911, I'm on the 911 Coordinating Council, I think that's how that operates.
Okay, so that's where I wanted to make sure on the fax, because like, for instance, in hospitals, they have lots of machines that dial out, it has a phone number. So that's one of my questions. The other one has to do with hotspots. That's a phone number. Is there a tax on that?
It'd be the same as the fax machine, is my understanding, that because it's not a voice back and forth, it's just a data device.
Okay, and then the last question I have is, for instance, Google, you can do a phone number through Google, and it's $10 per line per month if you do the starter pack, or standard pack is $20 per line per month. You can call from it. I don't have an actual Google number, so I don't fully understand, but do they pay taxes on those?
That's a good question. I don't know about that one. I have Google Fiber, but I don't have a Google phone.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. I think that's why I think the insertion of voice is important in the bill, as Scott has presented to you all, because that helps differentiate between the data device and a voice device.
I wonder if that follows under the facilitators.
I'm not sure what you mean. We can look at the 911 statute to make it sure it
Okay,
mirrors, or Scott.
I just want to fully understand, because I have lots of concerns when it comes to that. I'm just thinking, for instance, on our business standpoint, we have hotspots, we have all that stuff. In the end, are we going to be paying, and granted, we are a small business, but I'm thinking of, what about all the school districts that are providing hotspots to all the students that don't have internet, and then now are the schools going to be paying this, so forth?
No, I think the hotspots would be in that category of the fax machines, a data machine only, not a voice-to-voice capability. That, I don't believe that would apply to the whatever the surcharge ends up being would not apply to that type of device.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
I think what we can do on that is, because we're not going to kick this out today, we're just starting the work process, is we can have Scott get with the utility folks and look at that 911 language, because we're trying to kind of mirror that.
And I'm all for mirroring 911. I just want to make sure that I'm just looking at somebody who pays a business.
You're going to find that 911 is actually hitting some of those that you're asking to
Yes.
exempt in this bill.
Yeah, and that's why I'm
Our
curious.
bill would actually be tighter than 911.
And that's why I'm curious where we're at, so.
Right. Representative Haswood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to add on to that, I was thinking about our international students where they use like Telegram, different apps that may not have a United States number. I do have a Google number and it goes through my phone, through the phone bill I pay. So I assume that's kind of similar, but I just wanted to add that to the list. Thanks.
Got that, Scott? Okay, so we'll come back to, we'll call voice number 4. We'll come back to that tomorrow. Did you have something?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Representative Ellis.
This is neither here, just a suggestion. It would be nice if our companies would donate like a half a penny a call. It would be a great promotion for them. Good advertisement, just a thought.
Okay. All right, now we're on page 5. And Scott, if you want to explain what balloon, it's labeled as 2, is doing the first balloon on page 5. Is there one more on 4?
There is.
Where's that at?
By renumbering the sections.
Oh, renumbering? No, section 4. Yes, okay, you're right. Okay, so that, where it says section 4, that will be a balloon number 4. So Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So this is the insert following line 28. It's one of the larger balloons labeled section 4.
No, that's number, okay, I'm sorry. It will be amendment 5, section 4.
Right. So this would insert a section 4, and this language is very similar, almost identical to the 911 language. There is language in the 911 statute about liability protection for providers. If anything goes wrong resulting from failure of any transmission connection or operating or maintaining the line, the language provide that except as would be allowed under the Kansas Tort Claims Act and except for gross negligence or willful and wanton misconduct, there would be liability protection for providers in those instances.
And I believe that's just canned language that we have in a lot of different areas. Isn't that correct? Questions, comments? Representative Epley?
No.
Motion.
No.
Motion. Oh. Representative Arnberger.
I'll make the motion since the vice chair isn't paying attention. Madam Chair, I move that we amend the bill to have this section, the section 4 amendment.
Motion made by Representative Arnberger, seconded by Representative Kelly.
I can't even say.
Are there any other further questions or comments? All right, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion passes. Okay, now we're on page 5, correct, Revisor Abbott?
Almost.
Almost?
So this is attached to that balloon that begins on page 5, but you see on page 4, near the end of the page in lines 41 through 43, there's some stricken language. And then the first three lines of page 5. This is essentially rewording that language to be more consistent with the 911 statute. This speaks to how the 988 fee would be stated on an invoice, whether the provider decides to separate it or to combine it with the 911 fee as a single charge, and how those charges may be displayed on the invoice.
Okay. So, committee, if you look on page 4 and you look at starting in the center of line 41, 42, 43 are struck. Lines 1, 2, and 3 on page 5 are struck and replaced with the language you see in the balloon to the right. Discussion or comments? Seeing none.
Madam Chair,
Representative Epley.
I move for, I thought you asked Warning if I had a question last time and I didn't. That's why I declined. Anyway, I move for the changes you so eloquently outlined on page 4 and page 5. Madam Chair.
Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Reese. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion carries. Now, on page 5, the second balloon. Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The second balloon also pertains to the 988 fee. This is also language that is taken directly from the 911 fee statutes, stating that the 988 fee imposed by this bill would be the only 988 fee imposed in the state. So it's a statement by the legislature that it would be the only fee imposed, and also a preemption provision for any subdivision of the state that might otherwise try to impose their own fee.
So if a local unit of government wanted to come in and impose, they wouldn't be allowed to do that, correct?
Correct.
Questions, comments on this? Representative Berquist.
And the question comes, if those individual communities are not able to do so, if they feel like they're in any way disenfranchised geographically or otherwise from getting the services they need towards the same purpose, then what redress would they have and who would they address? Thank you.
What redress do they have today on 911?
I do not know. Thanks for asking.
No, I think it's the same type of a deal. You don't want to come in with a system like this. And although 988 and 911, they're similar, but yet there's a lot of differences with them. So I understand what you're saying. We are required by law in our rural areas, especially, because urban's not going to be near as much of a problem as our rural, is we have to respond within 1 hour if we need a mobile crisis unit, period. It's within 60 minutes. Questions, further comments? Seeing none, I entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I move for insertion of the balloon section F as presented and outlined so nicely by the reviser.
Second by Representative Kelly. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion carries.
Except for 3, but that's okay with me.
Yep. Okay, now we're on page 6. Would that be correct, Reviser Abbott? And the first one is balloon. That's in addition to line D, correct?
Yes, Madam Chair. So this kind of all goes together, all of the changes on page 6 from lines 2 down through 22, including that insertion that begins personnel. This is the language that speaks to what money in the fund, the special revenue fund that the bill creates, could be used for, where the money from the fee is deposited and credited to. So this would essentially replace all of the language in the underlying bill about what that money can be used for, and replace it, I think, with language you already brought up about from federal law and federal guidance, that the money in the fund can be used to pay expenses that are reasonably attributed to ensuring efficient and effective routing of calls made to the hotline to an appropriate crisis center, personnel, the provision of acute mental health, outreach, stabilization services, public promotion, data collection, and reporting. So those would be the allowable expenses from that fund.
Okay, we'll call this balloon 8. Discussion, comments, questions? Seeing none, Representative Epley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move for balloon 8 as presented, and it looks like to me there's 3 parts to it, as was outlined by the reviser on the top half of page 6. I hope that's clear.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
There was a second from Representative Kelly.
Oh, seconded by Representative Kelly. I'm sorry. Now, questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion carries. Now, where's our next one at, Scott? So we're saying that 1, 2, 3 boxes were all in the number 8 amendment, right?
That's correct.
All right. So now we're on the 4th box on page 6.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This is another box on the balloon that will need to be adjusted in light of what you did on the non-prepaid fee. So this balloon has language about what the rate for prepaid wireless service would be, so that 4th box would not be necessary.
So we will cross that off completely, so it's not even an amendment. So now we're going to go, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, to the 5th box, which is a 0.4%.
Yes, Madam Chair, that would strike the 50-cent prepaid fee in the underlying bill and replace it with 0.5 or 0.4% per retail transaction on
For
prepaid.
prepaids,
Yes.
which mirrors what we do in 911 today. Although, is there a motion, Representative Epley?
So moved as presented by the reviser.
All right, motion made by Representative Epley, seconded by Representative Reese. Is there comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion carries. Now we're on page 5, line 38, we strike shall and it's may. Is that a motion?
Madam Chair, if you would like, this is another issue that a few of the balloons in the document address kind of together.
Okay.
Similar to the amendment you adopted on the postpaid fee about allowing the fee for 988 and 911 to be either be combined or separated.
Yes.
And requirements for how that's displayed on the invoice. That shall to may, the box immediately below it that describes if the fee is stated separately. And then going on to page 7, the stricken material in lines 13 through 27 in the insert on page 7 all speak to that issue to treat it in the same way that you just amended the postpaid fee invoicing.
Okay, so if everyone can follow along, is where you see the 0.4%, you see may, you see the balloon that says if such fee is stated separately on such document, such fee shall be labeled 988 fee. Those are all on page 6. You flip over to 7, the first box says stricken material in lines 13 through 27. Those are all considered Amendment 9 or Balloon 9. Oh, and the one below that, too.
Yes.
Is there questions or comments? All right, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion passes.
Yes, I made the motion and he seconded it.
Oh, he seconded
I made
it.
the motion and Kelly seconded it. It was just
I just didn't say it.
so quiet you didn't hear it.
Okay, what we're going to try to do, committee, if we can get to this last page, we're still not going to kick this out. We will be back tomorrow, and we'll have a revised, cleaner version of what we've done here, so those that we've combined now can be one balloon. Is that right, Scott? So if like we had 4 boxes on 9, can we make that 1 or not?
Madam Chair, some of those are inserted at different points of the underlying bill.
Then that's fine.
What I can do is anything you have changed or removed, I can have a new version tomorrow that reflects that.
Okay, can we label these like we numbered them today on the, so like if we've got 4 9s, we have 999 or not? Okay, never mind. Let's go on, Reviser Abbott. You're fine, page 8.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first amendment on page 8 speaks to where money from the prepaid fee is deposited in the state treasury and credited. The underlying bill took the prepaid fee money and placed it in the CCBHC fund, the Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinics Fund. This would instead direct that money to the 988 Suicide Prevention and Mental Health Crisis Hotline Fund.
Okay. Questions, comments?
I move for balloon 10 as presented.
Second, Representative Epley. Questions, comments? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. Ayes appear to have it. Motion carries. Second balloon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The second balloon on this page is similar to the one you just did on the postpaid fee. This states that the prepaid wireless fee that's established by this bill would be the only 988 funding obligation imposed on prepaid service, and would also include the preemption language that would stop any political subdivision from imposing their own separate 988 fee.
Same thing we did on cell and landlines. All right. Is there a motion? Motion
Yes,
by Representative Epley,
Madam Chair.
seconded by Representative Kelly. All those in favor, or questions or comments on that? I'm driving you crazy, aren't I, Representative Clifford?
Doing a great job, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion carries. Now we're on the third balloon on page 8, correct?
Yes, Madam Chair. The third balloon would, so for the most part, this bill uses the same definitions for terms as the 911 statutes, for things like consumer, prepaid wireless service, all of those. This would clarify in light of the legislature's actions last year in Senate Bill 50, the Marketplace Facilitator Bill, tax bill, that seller also includes a marketplace facilitator as you defined in law by that bill.
Okay, motion by Representative,
Yes, move for balloon number 12 on page 8 as presented, which is the third one.
Epley, seconded by Representative Kelly. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion carries. Fourth balloon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, this was another one you could have combined. So in light of your amendment to where the money from the prepaid fee goes, the establishment of the CCBHC fund, this amendment would strike that section, so that fund would not be created. So this is related to what you just did a few minutes ago.
Was that in the balloon 3?
That would have been in the first balloon on that
Okay,
page.
but that's not what we said, so we'll go ahead and adopt it as a separate, if that's all right. Motion by Representative,
Aptly for stricken material headlines 10 to 24, number 13.
seconded by Representative Reese. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Ayes appear to have it. Motion carries. Okay. The fifth box, Section 8. Revisor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Section 8 would impose a reporting requirement on KDADs. It would require on or before the first day of each session of the legislature, would require KDADs to submit a report to the House committees, this committee, Appropriations, and the Energy, Utilities, and Telecommunications Committee. And in the Senate, the committees on Ways and Means, Public Health and Welfare, and Utilities, detailing outcomes related to the implementation of the 988 Suicide Prevention and Mental Health Crisis Hotline in Kansas, including but not limited to key performance indicators for the implementation of the hotline.
So I move for balloon number 14, which is the fifth large area circled on page 8.
Motion by Representative Epley, seconded by Representative Kelly. Questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion carries. Last amendment on page 8, or balloon, excuse me.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is in that same box, but because they're separate topics, I'll address them separately. Section 9 would be an encouragement to school districts that issue student identification cards to students in grades 6 through 12. They would be encouraged to include on those cards the 988 Suicide Prevention and Mental Health Crisis Hotline number, or before it's in operation, then a state or national suicide prevention hotline telephone number.
So when we adopted the, 14. When I said the fifth box, we only adopted Section 8. Now we are adopting Section 9. Does everyone follow? Yep. Motion made by Representative Epley, seconded by Representative Reese. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion carries. Now we're on the last box.
Madam Chair, that last box is related to some of the earlier amendments, just technical cleanup that I will have to do in light of the number of changes you have made to the bill.
All right. Motion made by?
Dr. Representative Epley for number 16, the very last box on page 8.
Seconded by Representative Ellis. All those in favor, questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Okay, so committee, what we'll do is we'll have a clean copy of this tomorrow, so whatever was omitted completely will disappear, and we will only have the balloons and boxes on what it is that we passed, and then we'll do final action on this tomorrow. So thank you very much for hanging in here. I know I'm rushing you to your 3:30s. Appreciate it.